So, Deltarune Chapter 3 and 4 just came out, as you might have heard, and with that comes tons of new material to discuss and theorize about. And as a certified brain cell user and GOAT fan, I've taken it upon myself to finally try my hand at this whole critical thinking thing. And after countless hours of forming a thought, I've come up with a few Deltarune mini-theories, if you will, and only some of them require the use of the crackpot to make sense. So... The most memorable minigame of Chapter 3 that none of us actually got to read is the song Raise Your Bats, a fun but ultimately meaningless song written for the sake of a minigame. But what do I think that this song in particular is written by Des and Asriel? A song called Raise Your Bats... oh, wait. Obvious evidence is obvious. But don't worry, I've got a bit more evidence than that, I hope. In Chapter 4, we get access to Des's room. In it, we finally get a real look into the type of person that Des is. A punk gal with some spunk. She really feels like a cool and hip early 2000s teen. And within her room we see a few things. First, every instrument used in Raise Your Bats. The drum set, the microphone, and of course, her guitar. Along with some other random, probably expensive instruments thrown on the floor like dirty laundry, which any true musician will tell you is based as hell. On her closet though, we see some posters for concerts, supposedly of her own music. When interacting with them, we see Chris mention many concerts, some which may never be played. Snooping around some more, we find Asriel's shirt in the closet, and his retainer? Seems like Susie ain't the only one pulling in this room. But with this, we can infer Asriel wrote music with Des, and maybe even performed with her. And going back to the song, who do we see singing vocals? I mean Ralsei. But assuming I'm right, and Raise Your Bats was written by the two, maybe there's some information that we can glean about their roles in the story in the future. The main verse of the song begins with, "Plug your ears."
When the demon heart is crying and the blood is gushing bright, raise up your bats for the burning fight. When their hope is slowly dying and your future has lost its right, raise up your bat and face the fright. Let's knock 'em dead into the night.
Overall, not too much to glean from here. It's the exact sort of punk lyrics that we would expect from Des. However, the mention of knocking dead into the night is interesting. If we relate this to what's happening in the Dark Worlds, we could infer that Des will end up fighting against whatever the demon heart is.
Follow me into the dark with your heart as the arc which shall shine you the way. Because I'm with you in the dark with your heart as my mark which shall guide you the way.
One, the heart being a fairly obvious reference to the soul, or the player. The heart being both the vessel and the shining light for everybody. Also, the heart shining light is a huge battle mechanic in Chapter 4, against both Jackenstein and the Titan, which seems maybe important for lore. And of course, the arguable motto for the entire game, "I am with you in the dark," shows up here as well. Even more interestingly, the entire chorus is sung to the melody of Lost Girl. So this song is painting Des as a heroic figure, one trailing and protecting our cast through their adventures. But what makes me think Asriel is a part to play here too? Admittedly, that evidence is a bit more flimsy. But we know for a fact that Asriel and Des were close. Very close. And with that, Ralsei is the one to sing vocals on the song. To me, the chorus of the song could also read as a conversation between Chris and Asriel/Ralsei, with Ralsei always accompanying Chris through the Dark Worlds. Either way, Raise Your Bats feels like our first true look into Des's and possibly Asriel's personality. This follows another much older theory in the fanbase, that Susie is not actually the girl of prophecy, but rather Noelle. There's a solid theory that Noelle is actually the girl of prophecy, and the Snowgrave route I think seems to hint to that. However, Susie managed to right place and right time her way right into the prophecy. For a few reasons, I think this fits very cleanly into the character arcs for both Susie and Noelle. But as for evidence for this, first and least importantly, the prophecy never explicitly states that Susie is the one in the prophecy. Alright, is that really all I have for this? I have to have some more. Oh, here we go. First, let me quickly recap some ideas behind the Noelle is the prophecy theory. Firstly, Susie is the only character that we, the player, can't control. Susie routinely makes her own decisions that'll impact the story. Meanwhile, even with Noelle in the party, we the player learn how to control her as well. Secondly, Gerson in his secret fight in Chapter 4 hints that Susie was meant to be an antagonist in Chapter 1. With Chapter 1 of Lord of the Hammers being called March of the Dark King, this is where the heroes go and defeat the king and stop the dragon. Later, Gerson even calls Susie the dragon. Susie's story is about her never finding a place where she can feel accepted, always needing to play the villain to survive. Initially, that's all there was. But now that she is supposedly in the prophecy, she finally finds a place where she belongs, with friends who she trusts. But Susie carves her own path and follows no one else's instructions, even saying in Chapter 4 she will defy the prophecy if whatever horrible ending does come to pass. Even from just a story perspective, Susie finding her place in her friends as a predestined fate goes against everything her story's about. Instead, her story is far more satisfying as a character, learning that she actually was not chosen by fate, and was once again ignored. However, she learns that she can carve her own path into becoming a hero. But not only does the switch up serve Susie's story, but I think Noelle's too. Noelle throughout all of Deltarune is learning to stand up for herself, to finally break free from what others want from her, such as her mother Carol, Birdley, or even us the player in the Snowgrave route. If Noelle were initially in the prophecy, being told what to do by fate, all of her efforts to become her own person wouldn't make sense. Rather, by being replaced by Susie, she can finally learn that no one, not even a prophecy, can stop her from making her own choices. Perhaps even within the Snowgrave routes, Noelle will eventually reject the player's influence and control. This may be how, eventually, the Snowgrave route re-merges with the main route to create a single ending for the game. Except instead of her defying her mother, she defies a much more terrifying villain. This switch up, to me, serves as the themes of fate Deltarune is setting up, and provides a great story for both Susie and Noelle. Alright, let's look back at Gerson's description of Lord of the Hammers. We already touched on it a bit earlier, but I think each of the chapters seem to link to a chapter of Deltarune. Chapter 5 is called The Fields of Pink and Gold, and the events are described as a vast garden is charred in an inferno of jealousy. Almost had to sneeze. Many people online have pointed out that Asgore's color scheme in this game is indeed pink and gold, and with the mention of flowers and gardens, it seems that Chapter 5 will take place in Asgore's flower shop. Stop! It's me from the alternate timeline where I actually did all of my research. Apparently, there's a part of the prophecy that explicitly states the next chapter will be in Asgore's flower shop, so this is no longer a theory, just fact. If we look around in Chapter 4, we can find some dialogue from Asgore talking in Carol's room. He explains that he has a plan to finally make Toriel believe him, to make everyone believe him about what really happened. While he doesn't say what specifically, we can safely assume that he's talking about what happened to Des, the thing that resulted in him being removed as police chief. He says that all he wanted to do was protect everyone. So it seems that, similar to Undertale, Asgore made a risky decision for what he thought was for the greater good, but one that many others didn't agree with. But this hints that Asgore knows about the Dark Worlds, maybe that he's even been in one. Along with this, he seems to at least somewhat be working with Carol in this. He was there for Des's disappearance, and other than Carol, seems to be the one who knows the most about it. While we know Carol removed him as police chief, she still obviously cares for him to an extent. She gives him a place for his shop, and even when he makes no sales, she gives him a job as her housekeeper. And he's also one of the boys with Rudy! He even says to Susie that Carol's a pretty nice person once you get to know her. This, along with having access to what seems to be a shadow crystal, is definitely a hint that the flower shop is where Chapter 5 will take place at. But what could cause this garden to be set ablaze in an inferno of jealousy? Now, for Asriel, I'll be honest, I don't know what role he might play, but I've got a feeling he won't be absent, especially with how close him and Des seem to be. I just can't see a world where Asriel is not a key player in Des' story, whatever that ends up being. This theory, for the last time, goes back to Gerson's description of Lord of the Hammers. There's one more piece of information in here that I think hits at the entire ending of Deltarune, and that is what happened to Chapter 6. Gerson says that the author never finished Chapter 6, almost like the story swallowed him up. And that's very specific wording, swallowed up. In fact, this is very similar to what we know will happen in the prophecy, where darkness swallows the world. But there's even another instance that we know of, one where darkness swallows something whole. Something or someone. That's right, it's Gaster, baby! Can't be a Deltarune theory without the party! I won't dwell on it too long, but much of the fandom seems to agree that whatever Deltarune is, Gaster seems to be the author, from his Entry 17 logs, to the Gonnermaker scenes, to Deltarune being presented as a program for the player. I don't think it's a stretch here that Gaster is the author who would become swallowed whole by his story, i.e. the prophecy, i.e. the darkness. And that's how Deltarune will end. 6 chapters of god damn it! Okay, here's where the crackpot comes into play a little bit. Gerson to Susie then talks about how the youth were the ones who should have picked up the pen and finished the book, but no one ever did. That is, except Susie, a person gleaming with hope, who Gerson believes will finally pick up the pen and keep writing. And this is how I think Deltarune will actually end. Whatever horrible fate the prophecy speaks of will happen. The roaring will take place, and everyone, even Gaster, would be swallowed up by the grandeur of his story. But that's all in Chapter 6. In our lives, terrible things will happen. We all will suffer hardships and loss. No change in decisions or defying fate can change that. But what happens when the prophecy ends? When all that put to writing finally comes to a close? Well, some may just leave it there and wallow in the darkness. But others, with a pen of hope, can now finally finish the story. Only this time, they get to write down their own ending, free of fate. And there you go, a couple of crackpot mini-theories from someone who just fried up the last couple of brain cells. Those are going to take a few more weeks to get back.